Hello,
Hello.
how are you?
Good. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Figured I'd jump on if we could start early, then I won't have to leave as early if that's possible.
Yeah, that's fair. I'll wait for a couple more people and then we can get started.
Sure, sounds good. How are you doing?
Good. It's been a crazy day at college, but I'm sure it's been crazier for you with all those tropical storms.
Oh my goodness, what's been different this year? I haven't actually followed up on how Valpo's doing it. So, how are you guys? Are you in person, half and half? What's the deal?
We are currently in person, and some of our classes are like a mixed hybrid, so they may be online, and it really depends on the safety of the students. So, if
Mhm.
some people feel like they aren't comfortable coming to classes, they can go online, but majority of us are in person right now.
Huh, okay. Well, there's small classes anyway, still, right?
Yeah, we're still pretty small
From
here.
what I remember.
Yeah,
That was part of the beauty of being at Valpo was having the smaller classes. Sorry, I'm just
that's very true. It's okay. I had to adjust mine as well.
yeah,
All
good.
right. I think we'll go ahead and get started.
Great.
So, hello everybody to that's out there. I'm Tabitha Bartoe. I'm a sophomore meteorology major here at Valparaiso University. I am the vice president of outreach of Valparaiso's Women in STEM organization, and we are an organization that supports many women in STEM, and we are also associated with Scientista, and that's our national organization. So today we're interviewing Ginger Zee. So welcome, Ginger. She's a
Thank
chief
you.
meteorologist at ABC News and a graduate of Valpo in 2002. So
Yeah.
thank you for joining us. We're so excited for you to be here.
Thank you. I
So
know 2002 feels like it was not at all just yesterday.
yeah. So you graduated from Valpo in meteorology. Did you major or minor in anything else?
Yeah, so my Bachelor of Science is in meteorology. I did not study any communications or any television because why would I? No, and I actually have minors in math and Spanish. So math pretty much comes along with it. All you have to do is, or it might even be included now, but DiffyQ is the only one I want. I figured why not to
Yeah.
get that minor. And then I had always had dreams of doing bilingual broadcasting, and so that was kind of once I had settled on television, I thought I loved Spanish. It seemed like a language that came pretty easily to me, and I had so much fun. The professors at Valpo were so good. They were mostly all Colombian, so I really learned the dialect that they had, which was very different than a lot of the other Spanish that is used all over the world. But I felt like that was just that was like more the light side, right? Spanish was like
Hmm.
the fun side. When you were
Yeah,
in like radar meteorology and you're like, well, I don't know.
that sounds really interesting. So, I feel like as a meteorology major, we get this question asked a lot. What was your interest in meteorology? Like, how did you get interested? And was it
Yeah,
a story as your childhood that made you want to major in it?
like almost every meteorologist that I've ever met, I was inspired at 8 years old. I was watching storms come over Lake Michigan for a whole summer, and we saw waterspouts. We saw, lines of thunderstorms. And the beauty of Lake Michigan, if people have never been, it is just as flat and open as the Great Plains. And so it was like storm chasing without having to go anywhere. Just sitting on the beach with my brother. I always joke like, where was my mom in these times that I don't remember? It was a different era. We were just out there playing, and then we'd see the thunder and lightning. And I remember instead of being afraid, being almost magnetized. And that's where my passion began. So I ran back when I got back to third grade. We had encyclopedias. We didn't have Google, but that's like Google, but books. And I would just run to the encyclopedia that had the weather section or the tornado section, and that's where I would knew that I had something maybe a little bit more than just an interest in a storm. I started wondering more about the science.
That's really interesting. Did your mind ever change? Did you ever have another idea of a career?
Oh yeah, no, I think when you say you love weather and you're interested in being a meteorologist, people automatically think TV. They think, oh, you're going to be a broadcast meteorologist. And that was not my intention. I was so painfully shy. I didn't want to be on anything, let alone even a picture. If you watched my first storm chase at Valpo, I am shying away from the camera. I'm like ducking away. It's just not necessarily in my DNA, I don't think. But as I went through, saying I want to be a meteorologist when I was 10, 12, didn't really sound like something people did, unless you went into TV. So I didn't even think about it. And then Twister came out, and I saw the movie Twister, and Helen Hunt's character gave me that image. And this is why I think it's so important to do stuff like this, because if another young woman can see me, and just like I think it's so important to have Black women in STEM and Asian
Yes.
women in STEM, because you have to have that representation visually for a young person to identify with who they can become. It's very hard for us to nurture or understand that part of our brain before the connection is made. And so how lucky am I that Helen Hunt played a badass scientist, and then
For sure.
she gave me the image of what I wanted to be. And so I knew I wanted to chase storms. That's why I chose Valpo, because Valpo had the storm chasing as, they sold it pretty hard. That's what Bart said right when we walked in.
Yep.
And I was like, you know what, this is it. I knew there were a couple other schools that did it, but if I was going to do what I wanted to do, it would be that. And then as I was in school, I started realizing one of my professors, he doesn't work there anymore, but Professor John Knox was so encouraging. And he said, I really think you'd be good at communicating science. I think you should look into TV. And I was like, I can't. Yeah, that's not for me. I duck. Sorry, I'm not into it. And he really encouraged me to just do an internship. And I got the most fortuitous internship with the king of weather in Birmingham, Alabama, James Spann. And when I left that internship, I kind of morphed what I had wanted. I wanted to be just like Helen Hunt, but I also wanted to be like James Spann. So it was like James Spann and Helen Hunt had a baby. And that's what I became. I mean,
Yeah, for sure. So, as of now, after all of these years, after graduating from Valpo, what do you do now, and what's your favorite part of your career currently?
so now again, I'm kind of Helen Hunt and James Spann had a baby. That's still what I'm doing, but there's so much more. When you get into broadcasting, and when I set my goals in broadcasting, and that was to go all the way to the top, and I wanted to change how network television did weather. And I think I've really been a big part of that. Not only am I one of the first women to be in it, but the first female meteorologist as a chief meteorologist at one of the networks. That alone changed things. But then I like even getting to this point, there's so many other projects I want to do. There's so much more. You look at it, and I always looked at this as the peak. It is such a plateau, and then there's another climb, and that's where I'm going next. And so I'm really excited about a couple of projects that I'm working on. I feel like my reach, because of this wonderful platform I've been given, especially in science and children, and getting kids interested in our science, this is it, man. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. That and the crossover to mental health that I didn't anticipate at all. But when you become a science communicator, I found ways to communicate even psychology that I learned using the same tools that I have for weather.
And Valpo really loves you. We always talk about you all the time, and we're
Oh,
super
thanks.
supportive of everything you do. So we really appreciate all the things that you've done over the years.
Of course.
So, a fun little question. So, what were you involved in on campus during your time at Valpo?
Do you know that if I sit back and think about it, I'm the ultimate Marsha Brady, and that's kind of an old person's reference for saying that I like to sign up for everything, because there's an episode of the Brady Bunch where she signs up for everything and then she gets overwhelmed and exhausted. Saved by the Bell, kind of the same when
Yeah.
Jessie Spano takes her caffeine pills. These are kind of like classic icons. So maybe I'm the ultimate, like, I have to be a people pleasing type A, go as hard as I possibly can. So if you just look at my freshman year, I had started in soccer, and then realized they had to travel, and I was like, oh, I don't know, I want to storm chase. And so I backed off of that. I got into Palms, so I did the dance thing. It's dance cheerleading, because I was too big for the cheerleading team. I had always done competitive cheerleading. And then I did everything from taking jobs at like the call center where you call alumni and ask for money, to being an RA. What else did I do at Valpo? I worked at a bed and breakfast nearby to make extra money. I was involved in as much as I could be, like it's Chi Epsilon Pi, right? The storm chasing, the Val,
Yeah.
and then Vusit. I think that starts, but I was always signing up for stuff. And then, of course, the radio. I had a radio show for at least 3 semesters, I think. And I found that to be one of the most fascinating outlets and one of the best learning experiences for my broadcasting since I wasn't taking any classes in it.
So, with all of that you were involved in, plus with the workload of college and everything, how were you able to manage those two with not only organizations, the workload, but also your mental health?
I wasn't. I don't think I did a very good job at managing that. I think I was just running myself into the ground every single day, and that's the only way I slept well. You know, it was, I mean, granted, I was also narcoleptic and not yet had been diagnosed. So there were a couple other things going on. I taught aerobics. See, this stuff's going to keep coming to me. Over at the recreation center, I taught aerobics there and off campus at a couple of places. I wish I would have known earlier that not only, even in high school, but definitely in college, that it's okay not to do it all. You know, like it really is okay. Granted, if you're into it and you can handle it, but like what, I don't know what that got me. Especially in high school, I try to think like I always thought, oh, that's what they're looking for on a college, application. I don't know if that's what they're looking for. I'm pretty sure it's pretty test heavy, which is unfortunate because I do think having other interests is important. I think it's good to be diverse in what you do if you want to be diverse in what you do, as far as your interests and your interactions. Socialization, I wish I would have spent a little more time on. I wasn't as social as I should have been because I was too worried about making the money to pay back the college, to do the thing. And it's like, I still had a ton of debt when I left, so whatever. Like, I don't know that $5,000 I made in that semester really made a dent, So
Right.
sometimes I wish I would have been just a little easier on myself. And then on the education side, it's of course very important to get good grades and try very hard. But if I could give one piece of advice to anybody who's in school watching this now, you don't have to get a 4-point. Nobody once has asked me what grade I got in thermodynamics. Nobody once has cared that I did graduate. I can't remember which one. What's the lower of the two cum laudes or whatever? Nobody cares. Like not one person cares. It's wonderful that I did, and it's great for me and for my family, maybe for that ceremony. But like if it's going to hurt you and it's going to hurt your mental health, which I think it did a lot for me, I wish I could go back. That is one regret, and tell myself like, hey, how about you get an A- and just get over yourself instead of an A? I'm not saying get a D+ and barely and just pass. I just think the people who are going to have those difficulties are often putting that pressure on themselves, and nobody else is going to care. And I think that if I could just open that window for folks, that would be, hopefully insightful.
Yeah, I can completely agree with everything you said because that's also how I feel.
Yeah. But like, you know what? I'd almost go back and challenge myself at 20 or 19 to get a B. Like, go for it. Do it. Let it happen. Nothing's going to change.
Exactly. And that's what's important.
Yeah.
So, what you did mention was that you were involved in something with dance. And I know a couple of years ago you were on Dancing with the Stars.
Yeah.
So, how was that experience for you?
Yeah, that was not the type of dance we did with the with the palms. It was Dancing with the Stars. So again, on that kind of climb into news to the top at network, right? You think every step I kept thinking, okay, this one's where it's going to become like television, like glamour. Still to this day, last week I'm in a hurricane. I did have a hotel room. Sometimes we just sleep in the vehicle that we got because there is nowhere to stay or whatever it is. But I had a hotel room, no power, it's not glamorous. It's not, even in the show, the morning show, they had covered the wildfires and they flew them out private. I was like, what? No, we're always flying commercial. Like it just, but when I did Dancing with the Stars, that is television. Like that's the entertainment. That's when you cross over into real TV. So it was such a neat experience for many reasons. Television and just being a TV nerd, I would say at this point, knowing how they made the sets and how many people, and it's such a well-oiled machine. The show's been on 29 seasons. I mean, it's crazy how long they've been able. They're a very generous and positive show. At the base of it, you're taking a person who's expert in their field, breaking them down to the very base of something they are not good at, and then building them back up, which I thought on a personal level is probably one of the most, best learning experiences, especially for me after having my first child. I was already changing so much. It was a really great self booster,
Mhm.
broken for a lot of it, but then boosted. And not just physically, but like the mental part of it. It was a really special experience, and one that, now I have this family. It's crazy too, because 29 seasons, if you've done dancing, you all look at each other like, oof, you've done dancing. It's not easy.
Yeah, for sure. So you mentioned your family, and during this uncertain time, I have noticed on your Instagram that you've been doing little activities with your sons. So
Yeah.
how has that been, and how much do they enjoy you making the little experiments?
So my dream has always been to that next level or layer of what my career will be. I grew up watching Mr. Wizard, and that was a big reason that I loved science, in general, not just meteorology. And I thought that he always did such a great job. If you go back and watch Mr. Wizard episodes, it's actually very funny. He's pretty like demeaning to the child in a very funny, like tongue-in-cheek way. And then, the next generation had Bill Nye. I think it is so high time that a woman becomes the science entertainer. And I've been pitching for 8 years for it to be me. I'm realizing now I might have just like aged out, or something might have happened. But either way, I want to be in that production. I want to be a part of what that future looks like, because I think we could really use the motivation for kids to have science be cool. I think it's there. It's there in pockets. STEM, that alone, we didn't have that. Like even knowing that there are clubs, and I've done some really cool things with GMA to boost some of these programs, and it's been great. But I think that it could be even more. And I know that Netflix has a show with Emily, who my husband knows, and I think that's a great start. But I think it needs to be gelled together. I think it needs to be one, and I'm still voting to be a part of that.
That's really
So
cool.
that's
So,
why I should say that's why it makes it even more important when I do it with my sons, because not only do they get to learn, but I get to show them, the connection to women in science that is evident without there being question.
exactly. So, meteorology seems to, as a couple years ago, well, for many years, it's been a male dominated field. So, how has it been to be a woman in our field, and what have you done to help improve it with women joining meteorology?
So my first two jobs, I was the only woman in the weather department, and then when I got to my third job, there was one other woman, and so that was like the first time it felt so good to have somebody else kind of to look up to. Terry DeBoer at Wood TV in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Even in my class at Valpo, I think we started with 60 or so students, and graduated with 30 some, and there were only two of us women in the class. So I think that those numbers have improved from my understanding.
Yeah.
But that 2 to 30 is not a great ratio. And so I think I just understood it as this is how it is always going to be. I went to Chicago, I was the only woman. I came up here, I was the first woman. It was just like, I took a picture with all of the people who had done my job previously at Good Morning America for the 40th anniversary. 5 guys and me. And it was, I knew it, but to see the picture was like, yeah, I am doing something people haven't done before. So I've been fortunate that I've worked with a lot of great people who have been very open and welcoming, at most of the shops that I worked at. I still think the biggest hurdle has been the public perception. And this is really television's problem. Television started with weather being the bunny, puppet, rabbit, whatever it was doing the weather, because it really did start as entertainment. And that position has completely shifted. And I try to emphasize this to everybody all the time, is it's not just me. Like when you look at your TV, 9 times out of 10, that person is a true scientist. There are still people, stragglers and those types of things, and or grandfathered in type of people who have lots of experience, and I'm not taking away who they are.
Right.
But science is where it's at, right? Now you have to be the face and the brain. And those two things have to come together. And that's where we've gone. And it's just, there's this lag in television. And so unfortunately, my big hurdle my whole career, especially at the network level, locals were a little bit better because people somehow understood the connection, is to fight that, is to fight and say the weather girl term is demeaning. It takes away from who I am and what my purpose is and what my legacy should be. And there's, I don't fault people for it because, but I would never in my right mind call a nurse a candy striper. And like, that's the equivalent, like get with the times, everybody. And so
Exactly.
I will often still, oh, you're the weather girl for GMA. I'm like, no, I'm the meteorologist. And so I just kind of get, you know, curt but then
Yeah.
I educate them, and hopefully that does help for future, because I'm happy to take it. Doesn't penetrate bother me, but it definitely surface is like, how are we still doing this?
For
um,
sure.
but hopefully that's what I'll change. People seem to always learn from what I'm talking about, so I hope that just keeps going.
Yeah, and I also actually have your book, Natural Disaster. I cover them and I am one. If anybody hasn't read this, I recommend it. I read it over the summer and I really enjoyed it.
I'm glad.
So you talk about how I think you started with Wood TV and then you went to Chicago for an interview
Hmm.
and something happened where you declined it, but then you started getting major networks to contact you about jobs. So how did you feel in that moment and what did you decide to do?
Well, really, I had started at PBS in Maryville, Indiana, while I was in college. So that was, very small. Like,
Mhm.
didn't even get paid. It was free work. I don't even know how that's possible, but that's how I started. And then did radio in Grand Rapids, and then Flint, and then back to Grand Rapids. So it was in that time I had almost written myself off, like I really wasn't seeing the future. Granted, a lot of people spend a lot more time in smaller markets than I had, but I wasn't being utilized in my position at all. I wasn't even doing weather. They had me anchoring, which was fine, but it was like, that's not what I came here for. And so to have not only one place interested, but to then have like three calls from New York City on my answering machine at work, it really bolstered what had been a very difficult year or two of feeling that horrible purposelessness in my career. And so I'm so fortunate it came at that time. And then I signed a 5-year deal without having an agent in Chicago. And that's fine to do, except I definitely got paid the very least,
Yeah.
which is fine. But it was, it's such a cool experience and journey to go through, and working doubles and overnight seemed like the best idea ever on the weekends.
Hmm.
And so
Yeah.
that was just my time in Chicago. It didn't stay that way the whole time, but at the very beginning it was super exciting.
And throughout this journey, was there anybody who encouraged you to urge yourself to go towards meteorology and help you navigate your road to success?
So I think mentorship and doing things for others is what I always use as advice. It's one of my biggest things, and it's something that I was lucky enough when I worked in Chicago to work at Valparaiso. So working for my alma mater, doing the very thing that I felt like we were missing back when I was in school, was teaching that class where it is a crossover to broadcasting. Even for kids who didn't necessarily want to get into it, the communication skills that you can learn from someone like me who has had the experience, or if you really want to get into it, it's the best to learn from somebody who's in it. And so having those relationships with those kids, I still keep in touch with several of them, like semi-weekly in some ways, like Sean and Ellen, and I've got a whole host of them. Brandon was just texting me, that I've taught, and they're like my kids. They were my kids before
Mm-hmm.
my kids. And so I've enjoyed having that relationship, because I don't know that I had that intimate of a relationship with someone on the way in. James has always been a wonderful mentor, and if I reached out, absolutely. But we were definitely different. The age was different. With these guys, I was only 10, not even 10 years older in some cases.
Wow.
And so
Yeah.
we had a lot of life changes, differences in those 10 years, but I felt very close in proximity to where they were in life. And so that helped a lot. So James was great. Tom Skilling's always been great. I did an internship with him. I just don't utilize it. Maybe I should more. Maybe I should reach out to him. And then once I got into my jobs, like I said, it's like a Terry DeBoer, any of the women who are in the industry. And now even Janice Huff here in New York, you know, even in those short moments I've had with her, because she worked at the same place as my husband, you learn so much from people who have done it much longer than you have.
And so, what would be one of the most challenging things that you've dealt with in your career?
Learning that this wasn't just about weather. You know, I think that's probably the biggest one. Is I came into this as a scientist. I'm leaving it, not leaving because I'm not going anywhere, but I'm living in it as a science storyteller. And that's what I just don't think I anticipated. And it really wasn't until I was in Gulfport, Mississippi during Katrina, stuck there with everybody else for a week, seeing body bags for the first time, realizing I had gone down there with such the weather nerd, like, I wonder how high the storm surge is, you know, what does a 22-foot storm surge look like? Like, I was fascinated by the weather facts, and storms are full of facts and full of weather. Storms impact people, you know, and that's what my job has allowed me to do, is become a scientist who is also a human. When you're separated, and this is why I love storm chasing, because when you're separated and you're in a studio and you're just staring at a radar, I don't know how you can possibly have any idea how that radar connects to our atmosphere. Whereas in my experiences, I've been in all of them. I know what that rain band looks like when it sets up over Gulfport 7 years later, or whatever it was when I was there for Isaac, with those still slabs, you know, however long after, maybe it was 2012 that Isaac was. This is where it starts to get fuzzy. But you can't know, right? And so that connection, it's like a doctor without a patient or cadaver. How are they going to know what to do except for just coming out of a book? That's why I've been so lucky to have these experiences and then how to be compassionate, taking my passion and compassion and putting them together. And I think that's one part of what has made my career very special. And I've been lucky enough to have those opportunities, but then I've worked my butt off to be able to utilize them and cover both the science and the human.
And those two things are very important when you put them together.
They are.
Lastly, what advice would you give to college women who feel like their ideas aren't being valued by men in their classes?
I think that's you're valid to say that and feel that. So saying it is okay. I think that's the first step, is saying it out loud. Tell them, you know, I think that's where there were many times, and even in Valpo, and I don't think I wrote about this, but I felt like it wasn't because necessarily I was a woman, but because I had then chosen to go into broadcasting, even though I was finishing the Bachelor of Science, I felt like because I wasn't going to be an academic, everybody looked at me differently, and they did not value necessarily what I had to say, or what, you know, if I had an idea in a class, and maybe it was just a chicken and egg where it kind of went around, and maybe I didn't even think I was deserving of speaking or something, because I wasn't going to get a PhD, at least not in that moment. I still could, you know, that's what I tell myself now. I would say that say it out loud. I wish I would have called them on it. I wish I would have said, I know you think this about me because I'm choosing this. However, that's not true, and here's why. Or probably what I've learned the most is stay in your lane, right? Do you. It's their fault if they don't think that you're capable. I don't know who those, I can't remember specifics except for a few, but I don't want to like call people out. But I can think that I'm sure there were many more. I don't know what those people are doing today, and I'm sure they're doing wonderful things, and I have no ill feelings toward anyone. I should have just turned that into fuel and motivation for myself to do better, learn more, and yes, speak up, because you do deserve to speak and have your ideas heard. And don't be embarrassed. The other thing, you know what? This is a big one. I went into every job so worried about looking like I didn't know what I was doing. How are you supposed to know what you're doing when you haven't even done it yet? That's the point of learning. Like, college is to learn. So if you're in school right now, the point is to not get it, right?
Yeah.
When you're done, you get some of it, but you're never going to get it 100%. And I've gotten much better in the last 20 years at asking and feeling confident in asking and not knowing. That's actually a really good piece of advice that I wish I could go back and tell myself is like, say I don't know confidently, because nobody cares.
Right. I think with the experiences that you've had then up till now, I think those experiences have gotten you to where you are, and that's why you're so successful today.
I hope
So, do you
so.
have any
Yeah.
do you have anything else you'd like to share about your field or experiences or what you're doing now or in the future?
Yeah, I think the other one that I've learned just in the last 4 years, the labeling we give ourselves, because we all do. And this is nice because STEM gives a label purposefully to allow you to have a positive label and hopefully something that you're interested in. We all get labeled by our parents. It's hard. I have kids. It's very hard not to do it. One of them is dramatic. He just is. But like, I'm not going to say it around him, because I don't want to perpetuate it.
Mm-hmm.
Letting ourselves label ourselves and keeping it is probably the biggest problem. So my example is I loved writing almost as much as I loved learning about storms. And all the way through 6th grade, I took all the time in the world to do creative writing projects. I loved it. I just enjoyed it. I was reading a lot of R.L. Stine at the time, and like I was very into horror, which is weird because I don't really love that genre anymore, but I loved writing like gory stories. I don't know. When I got to 7th grade, I had switched schools, and I had a teacher say, maybe writing isn't your thing, because she didn't think my paper was as good as it could. I got like an A-, right? And I took that immediately as, you're not a good writer. That's not what she said, but that's what I heard. And I immediately put on, well, I got an A+ in science, so obviously you're good at science, you are not a good writer. And I perpetuated that even through my career when I was winning an Emmy for writing. Like, you look past your accomplishments even because your label matters so much. And then when I was pregnant with my son, I was looking for books about weather for babies. And I really couldn't find a lot that I really loved. I just didn't think that any of them, either they were totally inaccurate, and I'm like, ew, or they were so boring, and they were accurate. I'm like, I can do better than that. And I know I'm not a writer, but I could write down 60 words and put some pictures with it. And now I've got a platform. I could totally do this. So I go to the publisher with my idea, and they were like, yeah, that's more of like a chapter book, kind of 8 to 12-year-old thing. So you should write that. And I was like, oh, yeah, I'm not a writer. And then they were like, okay, well, why don't you go try? And I thought, fine, I guess, like trying this new motherhood thing, I might as well try. So I wrote a couple of chapters, brought it back, and they were like, we love it, write a trilogy. And I was like, you want me? But I'm not a writer. And sure enough, the thing that I told myself for almost 30 years was completely inaccurate. And then that book led to me telling stories about my life, storm chasing, leaving a wedding 3 weeks before I was supposed to get married. And they were like, that's a book. You should write that. So I finished that book, the one that you have, Natural Disaster. I went to write a baby book about weather, and I came out writing a New York Times bestseller about mental health and suicide. It makes no sense. Except that it does. And I think the most important thing is that I learned to drop the label. I loved writing. And apparently, think about what I could have done in those 30 years. Think about what I could have written if I wouldn't have told myself that I'm not a writer. So I think that's always my big piece of advice to leave people is, first of all, you can be multidimensional. You're allowed to like and do multiple things. We all have brands that we want to fit. That's why the A is left in STEAM, right? STEM and STEAM, because you can be artistic and be good at science. We're all very, very complex. And so we should allow ourselves to be. We should see other people that way and ourselves.
That's very true. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today, Ginger. And everyone,
Of course,
thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks,
if you're
everybody.
interested in joining Women in STEM, you can follow our social media for updates or our email at vwis@valpo.edu. And the recording of this will be posted on YouTube later. And we'll also have some more talks coming up pretty soon. So I thank you again. And also a fun fact for you, Ginger. Our vice president of membership actually Dutch danced with you in Holland, Michigan.
Well,
Do you want
hello.
me to tell you?
I love a good Dutch dance. I'm Dutch, so I can say though that I think that was my first Dutch dance when I did that for TV. A lot of firsts happen on TV.
That's so interesting. Well, I thank you again, and hopefully, maybe one day I can meet you and talk more about broadcast meteorology.
Good luck with everything. Great job today, and thank you guys. Thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Mhm.